The same woman who once texted me, "Enjoy your cow poop career," just paid $300 to milk my goats and sleep in my barn loft. Let me tell you how I went from being the laughingstock of my friend group to running the most sought-after rural retreat in New England. My name is Lainey Brooks, and 3 years ago, I was drowning in the concrete jungle of Chicago. Every morning, I would wake up in my studio apartment, the size of a walk-in closet, to the sound of sirens and construction. I would slip into my corporate armor, designer blazers that cost more than most people make in a week, heels that clicked against marble floors like a metronome counting down to my inevitable burnout. I worked at Pinnacle Public Relations, one of those glass tower firms where 20-somethings sacrifice their souls for corner offices they would never see. 60-hour weeks were the minimum. 80-hour weeks were praised. I had not taken a real vacation in 2 years. My last relationship had ended when Marcus told me I cared more about quarterly reports than human connection. He was not wrong. But the breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. I was sitting in a conference room, presenting a campaign for a fast fashion brand that I knew was destroying the environment, when my phone buzzed. It was my aunt calling from Vermont. My grandmother had passed away in her sleep. Nana Rose had been my anchor growing up. When my parents divorced and the custody battles turned nasty, she would take me to her farm for the summers. I learned to collect eggs from temperamental hens, to identify which apples were ready for picking, to find peace in the rhythm of feeding animals and tending gardens. She taught me that the most important conversations happened over homemade bread, and that wisdom could be found in the way morning light filtered through barn windows. The funeral was small. Most of Nana Rose's friends had already passed on, and the younger generation had scattered to cities across the country. I stood in the cemetery, looking at the farmhouse that had been her pride and joy, now weathered and empty. The realtor suggested I sell quickly before winter set in, and the property value dropped even further. But something inside me snapped. I called my boss from the front porch of that farmhouse, where paint was peeling and shutters hung at odd angles. "I am taking a leave of absence," I announced. "For how long?" Diana's voice was sharp, impatient. "Indefinitely." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Lainey, you are throwing away your career. You will never get another opportunity like this." I looked out at the overgrown vegetable garden, at the barn where Nana Rose had once kept dairy cows, at the apple orchard that was now more weeds than trees. Maybe that is exactly what I need to do. The reactions from my friends were swift and brutal. "Lainey, is this some kind of midlife crisis? You are only 26, my college roommate Priya texted. You gave up champagne brunches for, what? Shoveling manure?" Came from Chelsea, who I had shared countless happy hours with in downtown Chicago. "Girl, you used to complain when your manicure chipped. Now you are going to be digging in dirt." This from Vivian, who had never seen me without full makeup. They treated my decision like a temporary insanity, a phase I would grow out of once reality hit, and I came crawling back to civilization. But as the weeks turned into months, their amusement turned to something sharper, something that felt like betrayal. "Still playing farmer?" Chelsea would comment on my social media posts. "When are you coming back to the real world?" Priya would ask during our increasingly rare phone calls. The real world. As if what I was building was somehow imaginary. Those first months were the hardest of my life. The farmhouse had not been properly maintained in years. The roof leaked in 3 places. The heating system was a patchwork of repairs that barely functioned. I spent my savings on contractors, on supplies, on veterinary bills for the rescue animals I began taking in. I started with chickens. 6 hens from a local shelter that had been seized from a hoarding situation. They were skittish, half-feathered, afraid of their own shadows. I built them a coop from salvaged wood and YouTube tutorials. When they laid their first eggs, small, brown, perfect ovals, I cried harder than I had at Nana Rose's funeral. Then came the goats. Luna and Sol, a bonded pair that a family could no longer keep. They were mischievous, intelligent, and absolutely determined to escape every fence I built. I learned more about animal psychology in those first few weeks than I had about human psychology in 4 years of college. The honeybees came next. A local beekeeper was retiring and needed homes for his hives. I spent hours in a borrowed bee suit, learning the intricate dance of hive management, the delicate balance required to keep these miraculous creatures healthy and productive. And through it all, I documented everything. Not because I planned to build a following, not because I thought anyone would care, but because I needed to process what I was experiencing. The profound shift from a life measured in quarterly profits to one measured in seasonal cycles. The way my hands, once soft and manicured, became calloused and strong. The way I started waking up before dawn not because I had to, but because I wanted to see the sunrise paint the mountains gold. I posted photos of my failures as much as my successes. The morning I found 3 chickens dead from a fox attack. The day an entire batch of preserves failed to set, because I had misread the recipe. The week the goats escaped and I spent hours chasing them through the neighbor's prize-winning flower garden. But I also shared the magic. The first asparagus spears pushing through spring soil. The evening Luna gave birth to twin kids while I held her steady and whispered encouragement. The satisfaction of eating a salad made entirely from vegetables I had grown with my own hands. Slowly, people began to pay attention. "Your morning routine is better than meditation," commented someone named @naturelover_Jenny. "I look forward to your posts more than anything else in my day," wrote @CityGirlCountryHearts. "This is the life I dream about having someday," said @BurnedOut in Boston. The following grew. 100 followers became 1,000. 1,000 became 10,000. By the end of my first year, I had over 50,000 people watching my daily journey from chaos to cultivation. But it was not the numbers that mattered. It was the messages. A teacher from Detroit wrote to tell me that watching my videos helped her through her divorce. A college student from California said my content inspired her to start a campus garden. A retired executive from Florida asked if I offered internships because he wanted to learn what I was learning. And that was when the idea hit me. What if people could experience this life, even if just for a weekend? I looked at the barn that I had been slowly renovating. It was structurally sound now, with a new roof and reinforced foundation. The interior was cavernous, beautiful in its simplicity. I could see it transformed, not into something fake or Disney-field, but into a genuine space where people could connect with the rhythms I had rediscovered. I spent the winter planning. I researched agritourism, studied successful farm stays, talked to local health departments about permits and regulations. I applied for small business loans, wrote business plans, designed insurance policies. By spring, I was ready to launch Willowbrook Farm Retreat. The concept was simple. Authentic farm experiences for people hungry for something real. Guests could stay in the renovated barn loft, wake up to collect eggs and milk goats, learn to make cheese and jam from scratch, practice yoga among the lavender fields, and end each day around a campfire sharing stories without the distraction of screens or schedules. I was not trying to create a luxury resort. I was offering something rarer, genuine peace. The first booking came from a couple in Boston who had been following my journey from the beginning. David and Amara arrived on a Friday evening looking exactly like I had 3 years earlier, stressed, pale, constantly checking their phones. They approached the goats like they were exotic animals, laughed nervously when I handed them baskets for egg collection, and seemed genuinely shocked that the vegetables in their dinner salad had been growing in the garden that morning. But something shifted over the weekend. By Sunday, David was helping me repair a section of fence without being asked. Amara spent an hour just sitting with the chickens, describing their different personalities like they were old friends. When they left, both were crying. "We forgot this existed," Amara told me as they loaded their car. "We forgot that life could be quiet." The reviews they left launched everything. Life-changing weekend at Willowbrook Farm Retreat. Lainey has created something magical. Not Instagram perfect, but perfectly real. Watching sunrise from the barn loft, learning to milk goats, eating food grown in the soil beneath our feet. This is what we have been missing. Already booked our next stay. The waiting list grew. 1 month out, then 3 months, then 6 months. Food bloggers wanted to feature my farm-to-table dinners. Wellness influencers inquired about partnerships. Magazine editors reached out for interviews. But the moment that truly changed everything happened on a crisp October morning. Exactly 2 years after I had left Chicago. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for a family from New York when I heard a familiar voice at the front desk. Hi, I have a reservation under Jennifer Martinez. I froze. I knew that voice, even though the name was fake. I walked to the front room and there she was, Diana, my former boss, looking uncomfortable in designer jeans and hiking boots that had clearly never seen a trail. Diana. I kept my voice calm, professional. Her eyes widened. Lainey? You run this place? I do. Welcome to Willowbrook Farm Retreat. She looked around at the rustic elegance I had created, the exposed beams, the local artwork, the fresh flowers from my cutting garden. Through the window, guests were visible in the pasture, laughing as they attempted to catch the goats for milking. This is not what I expected. I poured her coffee in a mug I had thrown myself in the pottery studio I had built in the old grain silo. What did you expect? I thought. She hesitated. When I saw your social media, I thought you were just playing at this. I thought you would come back. I served her eggs from my hens, bacon from a neighboring farm, vegetables from my greenhouse. Would you like to feed the animals before breakfast, or would you prefer to start with the garden tour? She stayed the full weekend. I watched her transformation happen in real time. The way her shoulders gradually relaxed, how she started asking genuine questions about sustainable farming. The evening she put away her phone completely and just listened to the night sounds of the countryside. On Sunday morning, she helped me collect eggs without complaining about her manicure. I owe you an apology, she said as she prepared to leave. I thought you were running away from success. I did not understand that you were running toward it. The feature in Sunset magazine came first, then Country Living, then the article in Forbes that called me one of their 40 under 40 rural visionaries. Each piece of media attention brought more guests, more recognition, more validation that what I had built mattered. But the sweetest vindication came in smaller moments. Priya, who had mocked my cow poop career, booked a weekend for her and her boyfriend. She spent the entire visit asking me to teach her how to preserve vegetables, and whether I thought she could keep chickens in her suburban backyard. Chelsea, who had made countless jokes about my muck boots, arrived for a girls' weekend retreat, and ended up extending her stay by 3 days. She left with a sourdough starter, and plans to quit her marketing job. Vivian, who could not understand why I would want dirt under my fingernails, brought her teenage daughter for a mother-daughter bonding weekend. They learned to make soap together, practiced archery, and had the first real conversation they had shared in years. The guest book filled with entries that made me cry. I forgot what silence sounded like until I came here. My daughter learned that food comes from soil, not supermarkets. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. This place taught me how to breathe again. The business grew beyond anything I could have imagined. I hired local staff, people who had been struggling to make ends meet in an area where traditional jobs were disappearing. Maria, whose family had run a dairy farm for 4 generations before corporate agriculture forced them out, became my head of guest services. Jake, a veteran struggling with PTSD, found peace working with the animals and now leads our equine therapy programs. We expanded the offerings. Corporate retreats for burned-out executives. Writing workshops for aspiring authors who needed inspiration away from city distractions. Sustainable farming courses for people wanting to start their own homesteads. Wellness weekends combining yoga, meditation, and hands-on farm work. The waiting list stretched to over a year. Travel publications called Willowbrook Farm Retreat one of the most authentic agritourism experiences in North America. Celebrities started booking stays under assumed names, desperate for genuine experiences away from paparazzi and social media pressure. But success brought new challenges. Developers offered enormous sums for the property, wanting to build luxury condos or chain hotels. Local officials pressured me to expand faster, to capitalize on the growing agritourism market. Investors approached with plans to franchise the concept, to create Willowbrook retreats across the country. I turned them all down, because what I had built could not be replicated or mass-produced. It was not about the infrastructure or the activities or even the animals. It was about authenticity, about creating space for people to reconnect with rhythms that modern life had stolen from them. 3 years after leaving Chicago, I stood in the same cemetery where I had buried Nana Rose, but now I was not alone. A couple who had gotten engaged during their stay at the retreat had asked if they could hold their wedding ceremony on the farm. I watched them exchange vows under the apple trees that I had nursed back to health, surrounded by friends and family who had traveled from around the world to celebrate in this place of peace I had created. The irony was not lost on me. The same people who had mocked my simple life now paid premium prices to experience it for a few days. They left reviews calling it transformative, life-changing, exactly what they needed to remember who they truly were beneath the layers of stress and expectation. My former colleagues from Pinnacle PR now follow my social media religiously, commenting with heart emojis on posts about baby goats and sunrise yoga sessions. They share my content with captions like goals and someday, not understanding that someday is always available to anyone willing to make the leap. The woman who once texted me, "Enjoy your cow poop career," just paid $300 to milk my goats and sleep in my barn loft. She left a 5-star review saying it was the best weekend of her adult life. They said I gave up everything when I left Chicago. They said I was throwing away my future, my potential, my chance at real success. But the truth is, I finally found success. Not the kind measured in annual salaries or corner offices, but the kind measured in the depth of sleep, the satisfaction of work that matters, the joy of watching strangers become friends around a campfire, the peace that comes from living in harmony with the natural world. I built everything I needed, right here on this land that my grandmother loved. And now, instead of selling corporate dreams that make people sick, I offer healing. Instead of creating content that makes people feel inadequate, I provide experiences that help them remember their own worth. The farmhouse where I once came to grieve has become a place where others come to heal. The barn where my grandmother once milked cows now hosts wedding ceremonies and writing retreats. The fields that were once overgrown with weeds now feed both body and soul for hundreds of visitors each year. This is what success actually looks like, not the climb toward some imaginary peak, but the courage to build a life that feels like home. So to everyone who mocked my simple life, thank you. Your skepticism gave me the determination to prove that there is another way to live, another definition of achievement, another path to fulfillment that does not require sacrificing your soul for someone else's version of success. And now, if you will excuse me, I have guests arriving this evening who are desperate to learn what you still do not understand. That the richest life possible is often the simplest one. The same people who once called this place the middle of nowhere now call it their sanctuary. They pay hundreds of dollars for the privilege of collecting eggs, milking goats, and sleeping under stars unobscured by city lights. They come seeking what I found when I stopped running towards someone else's dream and started building my own. They come seeking home. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of people who chose authenticity over approval, courage over comfort, and built extraordinary lives by following their hearts instead of the crowd.